Picture this. A woman scrolls through Instagram carefully curating her weekend plans. Brunch with the girls, a networking event, a house party. Her friends see her and think, what a social butterfly. What a connected person. What a fulfilling life. Arthur Schopenhauer, the master of philosophical pessimism, calls this woman a fool. Why? Because she hates people? No, because she doesn't understand what socializing actually does to her. Almost all of our sorrows spring out of our relations with other people. Schopenhauer's answer was a resounding no. Here's the problem with socializing. You don't create connections. You create compromises. You don't build friendships. You build facades. You don't become popular. You become fake. And if you believe socializing is the path to discovering who you really are, Schopenhauer has something to warn you about. Walk through any coffee shop, any office party, any weekend gathering, and you'll see them. People who've confused social validation with self-worth, small talk with meaningful connection, being liked with being fulfilled. They scroll through group chats and call it friendship. They attend networking events and call it personal growth. They sacrifice their quiet evenings for loud parties and call it living. And they think this makes them happy. But Schopenhauer thinks otherwise. All society necessarily involves as the first condition of its existence mutual accommodation and restraint upon the part of its members. These people are drowning in what Schopenhauer saw as humanity's greatest illusion. They think they're being social by choice when really they're just following the herd instinct that controls them. Here's the brutal truth. Every interaction they have is a transaction. They trade authenticity for acceptance. They exchange inner peace for outer approval. They surrender their true selves for the temporary comfort of belonging. Because Schopenhauer understood something about human nature that most people never grasp. We don't respect constant agreeability. We see through it. We don't admire people who never have opinions. We find them boring. We don't trust those who always say yes. We question their motives. And this misunderstanding leads to the first big mistake. The social butterfly mistakes their performance for their personality. These people are victims of what Schopenhauer called the most sophisticated deception in human existence. They believe they chose to socialize when in reality social conditioning chose for them. Every person watching this social performance is making calculations. The sharp-minded spot the mask. The truly wise see the prison behind it. And the enlightened, they step away altogether into the freedom of solitude. Schopenhauer had a principle about this. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. And if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom. But the modern socialite violates this principle constantly. She fills every hour with chatter, drowns silence in noise, and trades her mind for the comfort of the crowd. She transforms her existence into a performance for others. And when reality hits, it hits hard. The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him. Here's the truth that unsettles anyone chasing constant company. You didn't freely choose this life. You were lured into it. That night you stayed longer than you wanted. That joke you laughed at just to blend in. That moment you mistook chatter for connection. None of it came from clear thinking. You weren't choosing freely. You were being manipulated by what Schopenhauer called the emptiness of human need. No one grasped this truth more sharply than Schopenhauer. Lost wealth may be replaced by industry, lost knowledge by study, lost health by temperance or medicine, but lost time is gone forever. Most people don't approach social life with philosophy. They approach it with impulse. They get swept away by the thrill of company and forget to ask the deeper questions. Do I actually value these conversations, or am I just afraid of silence? Am I strengthening my mind or dulling it with gossip and noise? Have I considered what parts of myself I trade away just to fit in? Is this choice truly my own? Or is it simply the pull of habit and human weakness? And here's what she doesn't realize until it's too late. Every social decision is a philosophical choice where you can only lose your freedom. At best, the crowd entertains you while time slips away unnoticed. At worst, it drains you and leaves you wondering why you surrendered your life to it. Here's the unsettling reality about our urge to socialize. It doesn't care about your clarity of thought. It has no interest in your independence. It pulls you into noise, distracts you with triviality, and by the time you notice, your inner life is already compromised. The person with genuine wisdom avoids these traps. They don't measure their value by how many people they know. They don't chase gatherings to escape their own thoughts. They don't mistake constant company for true connection. And this is where the danger of social life reveals itself. Ordinary people think merely how they shall spend their time. A man of talent tries to use it. Schopenhauer understood that solitude and self-mastery are inseparable. The moment you surrender your hours to the noise of others, you stop being fully present to your own mind. But the modern man does the opposite. He gives away his evenings to chatter, spends his mornings recovering from company, and transforms his life into a routine of interruptions. And here's what happens when you become the eternally available one. You attract the attention of people who see you as a vessel for their noise, not through friendship. That's the flattering illusion. Through systematic extraction of your hours, attention, and focus. They don't come for your wisdom. They come for your presence. They don't value your silence. They consume your time. They don't nourish your mind. They drain it until nothing is left for yourself. Meanwhile, he thinks he's winning because people call him sociable. He doesn't realize he's being quietly robbed of the very hours that could have built his mind. Schopenhauer called this the blindness of distraction. The failure to see that constant company disguises dependency, that shallow entertainment hides profound emptiness, that social approval often signals the beginning of inner decline. In a world of endless invitations and shallow gatherings, every dinner party becomes a drain. Every small talk exchange becomes an interruption. Every weekend plan becomes a detour from your own path. Every wasted conversation becomes time stolen from your own growth. And everyone begins to expect your presence the moment you make yourself constantly available. Those who could have walked beside you become weights. You must carry connections that once felt optional harden into obligations. This is what Schopenhauer warned of as the misery of dependence. And the way out is never the one the crowd imagines. Folly is inborn. It spreads itself like a contagion. Here's the brutal truth about stupidity. It doesn't stay contained. You think foolishness is just an individual flaw, an annoyance you can shrug off, but it isn't. Stupidity leaks. It spreads. It infects the air we breathe. And before you even notice, clarity drowns beneath the noise. Because stupidity is not an individual weakness. It's a collective force. You will not escape it by reasoning with the crowd. The crowd does not reason. You will not rise above it by teaching. The masses do not learn. They imitate. You will not defeat it by pointing to the truth. They will mock it, drown it, and call their noise wisdom. Schopenhauer broke it down perfectly. The wise have always said the same things, and fools, who are the majority, have always done just the opposite. But the crowd operates from the opposite delusion, that belonging creates truth rather than bearing it. Watch what happens to men who base their thinking on public opinion. The independent mind becomes one of us. His clarity becomes secondary to the group's noise. His judgment becomes hostage to the approval of people who neither understand him nor care for him, and who will turn against him the moment he resists their contagion. The assumption that the crowd will provide wisdom is the inversion of philosophical truth. Real clarity comes from solitude, not society. Authentic insight comes from thinking for yourself, not echoing the noise of others. And here's why this matters in practical terms. The crowd will not think for you. It will think for itself. It will drift from one opinion to the next, chasing fashion, chasing noise. The period of feeling included lasts a moment. The period of living with borrowed stupidity lasts a lifetime. So you trade your independence for approval, your clarity for comfort in hopes of gaining belonging that vanishes the instant you disagree. Which life contains more authentic clarity? The man who let borrowed opinions define him, or the man who carved truth out of solitude? The best part of a man's life is the time he spends alone. Most so-called friends are merely acquaintances who use friendship as a mask for self-interest. Schopenhauer understood that what we call the joy of friendship is really just relief from the anxiety of loneliness. An anxiety that society artificially creates and then offers companionship as the cure. But here's the social reality that destroys the friendship fantasy. Friends don't complete you emotionally. They constrain you systematically, not just in time, but in freedom, judgment, and authenticity. He believes he's building friendships, but he's actually trading his freedom for promises that may never come true. The life of every individual is really a tragedy, but gone through in detail, it has the character of a comedy. Consider the comedy of social planning. You spend evenings catering to others' moods that shift faster than your patience. You sacrifice weekends for people who may never prioritize you in return. You compromise your judgment and values for alliances that dissolve at the first sign of disagreement. Meanwhile, the man alone spends his time on things that actually help him grow. He builds skills, makes choices freely, and can act quickly when life changes. Who ends up freer after 20 years? But the cost of so-called friendships goes beyond just time. Friendships create what social theorists call expectation traps. Each promise and obligation narrows your options. You can't relocate without leaving people behind. You can't change routines radically because others depend on your presence. You can't take risks that might upset the delicate balance of your relationships. The independent man preserves what Schopenhauer prized most: autonomy, the freedom to walk away when circumstances change, the ability to pursue ideas or paths that excite him, the choice to prioritize personal growth over social obligation. This is an indulgence. It's a matter of reason. If life is meant to be lived with deliberate choice rather than automatic habit, then safeguarding your independence is a responsibility. What the herd hates most is the one who thinks differently. It is not so much the opinion itself, but the audacity of wanting to think for themselves, something that they do not know how to do. Here's Schopenhauer's harsh truth for anyone trying to create. Every idea you bring to life comes with its own struggles, doubts, and the harsh reality of the world. You're not just making something new. You're taking on the fight against failure, distraction, and your own limits. Think about what you're really doing when you try to create. You're bringing ideas into the world that will face endless criticism and misunderstanding, the fear of failure and the pressure of expectations, the slow fate of relevance if neglected or abandoned. Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. Yet we act as if sharing every thought or seeking constant approval is harmless, ignoring how it can drain focus and dilute originality. The thinker admires their own concept, unaware that constant input, judgment, and distraction from others will erode its potential simply because attention and solitude are rare commodities in the social world. You can't consult the idea before it exists, but you can look honestly at your own process. How much of your creative work has flowed freely versus been stalled, diluted, or corrupted by distractions, criticism, and the constant noise of others? And here's the philosophical question that shatters the romance of sharing and collaborating on every idea. If you had the choice between birthing a creation in solitude and preserving its integrity, or exposing it early to a crowd and watching it be reshaped, diluted, and judged, which would you truly choose? Schopenhauer's point isn't that joy doesn't exist. It's that fleeting pleasures are always outweighed by struggle, a struggle that creativity alone can help us confront. True creativity arises from solitude. It is in isolation that the mind can transcend the will and give birth to art. The wise creator recognizes that protecting an idea from premature exposure is an act of care, not fear. You're shielding your creation from needless criticism and delusion. You're refusing to let social pressure corrupt its potential. You're choosing clarity and integrity over the compulsion to please or perform. In the end, creativity is not a gentle gift to the world, but a responsibility fraught with risk. To bring an idea into existence is to expose it to distraction, misunderstanding, and the relentless pressures of society. True insight and originality demand solitude, reflection, and the courage to resist the seductive interference of external voices. It is difficult to find happiness within oneself, but it is impossible to find it anywhere else. Schopenhauer understood that most of our desires aren't genuinely our own. They're implanted by social forces that benefit from our dependence, even when it harms us. And nowhere is this more obvious than in the pressure to constantly seek company and approval. From childhood, society programs you to fear being alone. You're told that constant interaction is normal and that solitude is a flaw. You see friends, family, and media celebrating those who are always connected, always surrounded. You hear endless messages that life is meaningless without others' attention or validation. But this conditioning benefits society far more than it benefits you. The world thrives on minds that conform, that seek constant approval, that defer their own insight for the comfort of the collective. It needs individuals distracted by chatter, obligation, and social expectation. People who surrender solitude, the only space where original thought can flourish. It needs creators who are timid, hesitant, and willing to dilute their vision to fit in. As Schopenhauer might put it, a man who depends on the approval of others for his happiness is a slave. He has surrendered his will to the world. The person who chases constant company, who lives to please or be admired, isn't making a conscious choice. He's executing society's programming. He becomes a copy of the collective, surrendering his own mind rather than cultivating original thought. And here's what Schopenhauer understood about social conformity. Most men pursue what others pursue, and their lives are spent in striving to satisfy desires that are not their own. The wise mind sees that social pressure and philosophical truth often conflict. Society wants constant interaction because it thrives on conformity and dependence. Philosophy shows that solitude is essential for the mind flourishes only when free from distraction. Society tells you that being liked, admired, or surrounded is fulfilling. Philosophy reveals that true fulfillment comes from insight and independence, not from catering to others. Society promises that connection and approval give life meaning. Philosophy demonstrates that meaning arises from understanding, reflection, and the courage to resist the crowd. The genuinely reflective mind challenges the rules everyone takes for granted. Must I constantly seek approval and companionship to feel secure? What, if anything, do I truly gain from bending to others' expectations? Does catering to social pressure strengthen my mind or merely keep me enslaved to convention? How would my thinking and creativity expand if I freed myself from the need for constant validation? Prioritize thought over approval. Signify the cultivation of your own mind over the expectations and demands of the crowd. Choose the freedom to create and reflect rather than surrendering your ideas to social pressure. Solitude is the soil in which genius thrives. Here's the reality that most minds never confront. Your distraction and compromise weren't inevitable. They were invited. That moment when you started chasing approval, when you let every opinion shape your decisions, when you measured your thoughts against the constant chatter of others, you weren't acting freely. You were being shaped by what Schopenhauer called the subtle force of social expectation. Schopenhauer recognized this clearly. Society binds the mind through habit and approval, creating dependence where independence is needed. Because achievement rooted in others, approval rests on unstable ground. Your work will not be valued in the way you hope. Your vision will not be carried forward. It will be reshaped by external pressures and opinions. Your effort and dedication will not be truly appreciated. They may be ignored, misinterpreted, or even resented. Relying on others' approval to define your purpose is a fundamental mistake. Real significance comes from what you conceive, not what others dictate. Authentic legacy emerges from original thought, not from conforming to expectations. True endurance comes from the ideas you cultivate, not from the attention or validation of the crowd. And here is why this insight carries weight in life itself. Others will live according to their own paths. They will chart their own courses, follow their own ambitions, and shape their own worlds. The intense period of directing or influencing them is brief. But the consequences of how you govern your own mind, your own attention, and your own creative energy endure for a lifetime. Solitude is not a void to be feared, and Schopenhauer laid it out in the best way possible. All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident. In the end, the mind thrives not when it bends to the expectations of others, but when it claims the quiet of its own space. The more somebody has in himself, the less he needs from the outside and the less others can be to him. When you stop letting social pressures dictate your choices and start seeing your life as your own, you grow more authentic, not less. You grow stronger, not weaker. You grow wiser, not smaller. True strength of the self does not rely on pleasing others or multiplying dependence. It is revealed in the clarity of your thought, the independence of your actions, and the freedom to cultivate your own ideas. People sense real fulfillment the way they sense real wisdom. Not because you explain it, but because it shows in how you live. Not because you create more of yourself, but because your presence carries depth, focus, and integrity. Schopenhauer understood where true lasting satisfaction comes from. The greatest of all pleasures is to be independent of others, for then the mind is free to follow its own course. But the dependent mind has only one focus: other people's opinions. Every choice feels like it must be defended. Every idea seems to require approval. Every opportunity is measured against how others will perceive it or react. The reflective mind maintains multiple centers of focus, nurturing personal growth when it matters, exploring ideas and knowledge when curiosity strikes, engaging in creative work when inspiration arises, seeking deeper understanding when the moment calls. This variety of focus is what makes someone truly wise, not because they are selfish, but because they pay attention to the full picture. Not because they avoid responsibility, but because they take it on thoughtfully. Not because they reject love or connection, but because they don't mistake obligation for genuine choice. The smartest thing you can do isn't figuring out how to meet everyone else's expectations. It's learning to stand on your own and think for yourself. The more a man is master of himself, the less he is the slave of others. In the end, strength of the self comes from living on your own terms. In the quiet recesses of solitude, the self reveals its true nature. As Schopenhauer insightfully noted, if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free. This journey inward is both a rebellion and a revelation. a rebellion against the conformist pressures of society, and a revelation of the boundless potential within. Schopenhauer's reflections on the nature of the self challenge us to reconsider our place in the world. Thus, the mystery of the self is not a riddle to be solved, but an experience to be lived. It is a continuous exploration of one's inner landscape, where each thought and feeling contributes to the unfolding narrative of who we are. The greatest wisdom is to understand that all knowledge is ignorance, and that the highest wisdom lies in the awareness of our own ignorance.